Welcome to AFuzion's January latest tech training webinar. This one's brought to you by Rob Pipert, a senior engineer and manager at AFuzion, expert in software, but you use modeling every day. But we're talking about digital modeling. Right now at this webinar, we have people all over the world. Thanks for attending. It's good morning, afternoon, evening, somewhere. Maybe we have French coffee and an Italian coffee press with a German stove here in America. It's a form of modeling. But the modeling we're talking about is aviation modeling, truly the future. Okay, let's dive in today. You know the format. Most of you are AFuzion clients or followers. 1 hour total, about 45 minutes of technical information, latest, greatest, and then 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A. If we don't get to all of your questions at the end in 45 minutes, we'll do our best to follow up by email, okay? So right now, everyone's muted, and we'll go ahead and keep that way. I'll unmute at the end if you'd rather have your questions orally, but you can use the question dialog box. See down there on your right? Yeah. Question dialog box. Type your question in any time. We'll get to it, okay? So with that, folks, let's go ahead and begin our webinar. DO331, okay? Document number 331 in North America, equivalent in Europe, provides guidance on aviation modeling. Now, aviation can be in the air, on the ground, manned, unmanned. But what is modeling? How does it relate to DO 178 or ED 12 in Europe, European document, right? That's the software guideline that we all use every day in aviation. Now, let's look. Whoops, technical error there. Wrong button. Sorry about that. A quick note about AFuzion. We're the world's largest dedicated aviation certification services company. Probably 75% of the world's 200 largest companies, those are our clients. Most of you are working for those companies. We do avionics software, ground systems, hardware, systems and safety. We do the actual engineering, safety assessments, system software, hardware engineering. We also do mentoring, training. Hundreds of companies use our templates and checklists. We have staff all over the world, even though we're based in America. We do consulting, certification, mentoring, our templates, plans, standards. We do basic artificial intelligence, machine learning. We teach how to use agile, modified agile, and autonomy and mitigate certain aspects. And we have 45 senior engineers, and we're real pleased that Rob Pipert is one of those working on key projects for us right now. So Rob is going to tell you about our agenda, okay? It's fast-paced, and Rob is truly an expert. So we're going to talk about how DO 331 fits into that aviation ecosystem. What are the extensions that make it work, okay? What's the benefit of using model-based development and how it affects your project? Some tips and tricks from Rob. And he'll conclude with wise words, then we'll take your questions, okay? So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Pipert right now. Rob has control of the screen and we'll pick it up right here. Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, Vance, thank you. And I appreciate your introduction. That was unexpected, for sure. So the agenda today, we're going to take a look at, what is DO 331 as it is scoped within DO 178. So particular, if you have a DO 178 project, we're going to look at how does DO 331 fit within that project. As well, within DO 331, there are some extensions that need to be considered within DO 178, Charlie. So we'll talk about how DO 331 does provide some extended items within DO178. Additionally, we'll get into using into some of the benefits of using model-based development as part of your project. What can you expect? And there are examples that are provided by DO331 that you can use within your project. And then we can also look at, the final thing we'll look at, and I think which is probably the most important, is how using model-based development in your project will affect your project. For instance, how much extra work do I need to do? Are there any items that I can exclude? And then what do I need to include? So for DO331, what does it include within the scope of DO178, right? Specifically, it includes model-based development and verification of software within the lifecycle of DO178. Your model-based development software, it will fly. It will be used on an aircraft. What's not included in DO331 will be guidance for models that are used for development and using only for software verification processes. So this is software that's intended to be used and will actually be part of your design. From a Venn diagram perspective, you can see that, or this diagram is depicting where DO178 and all the elements of DO178, they are merely extended by DO331. So DO331 includes DO178 with some extensions, and then we'll get into kind of some of what are the details of those extensions. What do you need to look at from the perspective of, from my project, where do I need to concentrate my effort when I do want to include model-based development? So DO331 excludes nothing from DO178. All the elements and the objectives that are contained within DO178C are also included if your project is going to use model-based development. So you don't get to save any steps along the way. However, there are some added elements and some added objectives that you need to cover throughout your design. Some of the items that are new, I should say, that have come up as new added elements in a DO178 project to support NVD is you will have a new software model standard document. And that model standard can include two different types of models that are defined within DO331. There's a specification model and a design model. So what should be included in your software model standard? Any of the techniques that you'll be using, the modeling languages, the modeling tools. And I just want to take a pause here on the tools. Many times, and I've actually, read and seen that a lot of times people get really focused on what the tools are, and the tools are actually defining the model and so on and so forth. The tools are actually can be used if selection of the right tools can help you in your design so that you don't have to go through all of the DO330, which is the tool qualification for use in DO178. Any of these tools will already be qualified for DO330 and have certification. So you also have to include the modeling guidelines and any of the constraints in your model. Some of those constraints may be that your model doesn't include the hardware interface, as an example. From the DO331 standard, we have very detailed definitions of what the specification model and the design model are. A specification model will be derived directly from your high-level requirements, and it does not go directly into source code. There are instances when you can use that to go directly to your source code. Your design model most generally will go straight to source code. as one other kind of example of how you would use the specification and the design model as defined in DO331, you can take the specification model, input that into your design, along with other high-level requirements. So your design model can bring in your specification model and also include extensions. So there may be other requirements related to, say, a communication protocol or other requirements related to hardware interfaces that aren't necessarily in scope for your specification model, but you can still include those as part of your design model. Another item that is, I want to say, addressed within DO331 is a little bit of an extension in the objectives. So for a DAL-A project or a DAL-A software development within DO178, there are 71 objectives. DO331 will add an additional 12 objectives, which if you do the math, that gives you a total of 83 objectives for a project that will use model-based development. So within DO331, they give you several examples of how you would use model-based development or the software model, design model, within your project. And it really relates to not necessarily, I mean, the output is always source code, but the differences will be in how your requirements are coupled together and how they're arranged from your high level to your low level requirements. And then where do you have within this arrangement the capability to actually generate this source code directly from your model? Some of the trade-offs between each one of these different model-based examples are shown here. So model-based one is more of a traditional engineering with a design model. And this one will allow you to have auto code generation that can be directly put into your design and go through your V&D and be part of your flight software. Same thing with the examples 2 and 4, where you have both. In example 2, you have both specification and design models. And example 3 is just using a specification model, which is bringing in your HLRs as part of your design. And really the kind of the benefits of using the model means that for complex designs, software that may have hundreds of thousands of lines of code, when you can use a model as part of your specification and you need to update, it's easier to translate those updates all throughout the project, as well as it minimizes the chances of mistake when you have to go through and modify all your documents by hand. Things get missed, items get misplaced or misnumbered. A lot of things happen, which puts more emphasis on your design reviews. So specifically, the elements in DO178C that you'll need to modify, whether you have an existing project or you have a new project. The elements are things like your software code standard, your software requirement standard, your software verification plan, your PSAC. Those items will have some differences in them related to DO331. And there's one additional one, which we've already talked about. The software modeling standard will be a new document that will have to go into your design. But your software code standard and your software requirement standard will remain unchanged. Your PSAC, however, is where the broad range of changes will be there. You'll have to put into your design, how do you plan to use modeling? How do you plan to verify it? And then what are the tools you'll be using? Are they certified? Will you be going through doing certification by hand as part of DO330? If we look at this from a Venn diagram perspective, or just kind of from a pictorial perspective, right? You can see that DO178, it includes all of these elements, as well as your software code standard, your software requirement standard, which will remain unchanged. But along the edge here, you'll definitely have to make changes, whether you have an existing design or you're doing a new design. In each of these elements within DO178, you'll need to be sure that you include and cover all of the objectives and requirements for DO331. The software model standard will live off on its own as a separate document that is specific to DO331. Yeah, so just kind of re-emphasizing, what the difference would be between existing and new projects. So, and when I got to thinking about this presentation, I thought, as an engineer, what would I really be concerned about if I was trying to incorporate DO331? And the basics are, it depends on what I'm doing. Do I have an existing project and I want to start using model-based development in that existing project? Or am I designing from scratch and I want to incorporate model-based development in my design from the start? Either way, I think you'll need to cover the elements that are depicted, in the on slide 15, and be sure that you cover all those items within your design. And I think that's all that I have, Vance. I can turn it over to you. Let's see.
Hey, Rob, everything looks good?
Okay, Vance. Yep. I think that's all that I have.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. That was a great presentation. Let's turn it over to Q&A right now. We got some questions here. A couple folks have asked us if we send the presentation slides, and no, we don't. Those are copyrighted. Strange American law. You know that we have more lawyers in America than aviation engineers. And there's a public domain clause, meaning if we distribute materials that they are released into the public domain. So this is all AFuzion copyright material, meaning you can just have the recorded slides. However, you'll get a recording link, and so you have access to all these slides. So it's almost as good as getting the PDF. And we'll just use first names. Stephen asks, so do models used to test validate code count as tools in this context? And do they need to be qualified? Ooh, that's a good question. I'll go ahead and take that one. So folks, if we remember from our training 3 months ago on tool qualification, tools help us make software or verify software, okay? So there's 3 tool criteria. There's criteria 1, which is a development tool, the output flies. So a compiler, a code generator, okay? Those are development tools. So is a linker. Doesn't mean they're qualified. We'll talk about that in a moment. Criteria 3, let's come back to criteria 2. Understand criteria 3 first. Criteria 1 is a development tool, output flies. Therefore, a criteria 1 tool, compiler, linker, code generator, could cause a defect. Now, criteria 3 is a verification tool. the output doesn't fly, but it could be incorrect. This test case passed. No, it didn't. It wasn't executed, or the evaluation was wrong. Criteria 3 cannot cause an error. They can fail to detect an error. Do you like Swiss Army knives? You know, the knife with multiple blades. Yeah, pliers, scissors that don't work, corkscrew. There you go. That's criteria 2. Criteria 2 is a Swiss Army knife tool. It does two things. It's a hybrid tool. Now, a code generator, Steve's question, or a model that tests or validates code. Well, if it tests its criteria 3, unless it's also used as part of the code review, okay? It changes, modifies code, removes dead code, takes deactivated code. Yep, that's criteria 2. It's not criteria 1. But do we qualify the tool? Okay. It depends. Will you verify the tool's output by other means, a review or test? If you can show the tool's working correctly, you don't need to qualify it. So a compiler, think about that. Compiler's a criteria 1 tool. You don't qualify it. There's two reasons. There's the FAA EASA reason and the real reason. Sorry, we have some FAA EASA people in the webinar. You got to laugh, folks. FAA EASA reason, you don't qualify the compiler because the tests, functional and structural coverage, remember MCDC, proving that each condition in a decision independently affects the outcome of that decision, where a condition independently affects that decision's outcome when that condition alone affects the outcome. That, with source binary coverage for DAL-A, development assurance level, comprises the compiler validation. So the real reason you don't validate the compiler is because you can't. Think about that. How many possible outputs are there to a compiler? Infinite. Think about that. You can always modify source code. Have you ever had a compiler without defects? No. Oh, why? Because there's infinite source code constructs. You cannot qualify infinity. Remember, DO is about objectives. There's 71 objectives. My height, my weight, color of my eyes, pulse rate, cholesterol level. Those are objective. I can measure them. Are you happy? Subjective. Are you successful? Subjective. How's your compiler? Subjective. So you don't qualify the compiler. Now, Steve's question, that's the background for everyone else. Steve, if we have a model to test, validate the code, is it a tool? Absolutely. Now, does it need to be qualified? Are you solely relying upon that tool? If yes, and you're not going to review that tool otherwise, test its output, yeah, you got to qualify it. Would you want to qualify it? Steve, I think so. Steven, I think so, because when you qualify a tool, you have to ask yourself, what's the cost? How many times will I use it? Well, that's a criteria 3 or criteria 2 tool. Not difficult to qualify. Criteria 3 is rather easy. Criteria 1, take a guess, folks. There's 71 objectives for level A, software on the ground, 278 CNS ATM or airborne avionics, right? How many objectives are there for a level A criteria 1 development tool? Take a wild guess. 71, you're close. It's 74. That's a lot of work. Okay. So, but this isn't. This is criteria, Stephen's question, criteria 2 or criteria 3, depending on how you use it. So that means, you should qualify. It'll be, in my opinion, easier to qualify it than it would to continually re-review all those tests, that code that those tests cover. Got it? Okay, hope I answered that question. Told me I asked a question. Rob, maybe you can take this one. How does the DAL, remember folks, level, development assurance level, some people call it design assurance level, that's been changed, criticality level, it's all the same, okay? How does the DAL-A objective regarding source code to object code, that's the source binary traceability, part of that compiler validation that I was just talking about, how does that traceability apply to model-based design? Rob, you want to do that one?
I think so. So for that objective within DAL-A, whether you are doing it with hand code or model-based development, you still have to provide object code traceability from your source code to your executable. Now, those tools may already be pre-certified and pre-qualified to validate, to already have done the source code to object code validation as part of their PO 330 certification. So choosing the right tool, you may have to do this by hand, or the tool itself provides this certification to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. And Akra has a question. I'll go ahead and take this one since it's tool qual. I teach some of our tool qual classes. When you use a qualified tool, such as Simulink, toolchain tools, MathWorks, Simulink, quite popular, for a new project, is it a must to generate artifacts that help in qualifications of those tools? Great question. I think I need a drink of coffee to answer that. I need one more drink, and then my cup is almost empty. Oh, I'm going to use this cup. Folks, this is a qualified cup. I qualified it yesterday when I drank my coffee. Okay? Now, I'm going to use it for the first time in a new house, a new project. It's already been qualified. I know this cup works, right? Let's see if it works. It doesn't work. Where's the coffee? Qualification. Remember, we don't certify people. We don't certify companies. In other industries, they do. I'm a certified accountant, lawyer, car mechanic, plumber. Are avionics engineers certified? No. Are companies certified? Oh, I'm CMMI level 5. Wow. I'm AS 91, yeah, aerospace standard 9115A certified. Okay, cool. How do I know everyone is following those certification rules? I don't. We certify an aircraft. An aircraft is a system. What is a system? A set of complex electronic items forming a complex whole in particular. That's the IEEE definition, Institute of Electrical Electronics Engineers, okay? So it's the aircraft that's certified and the systems on that particular model. We only certify the first aircraft of that type. 737-700, A319, A321 XLR. We certify the first aircraft. The following are replicated. They're equivalent. They're not identical, but they're equivalent. Same with tools. Oh, really? No. We can use tools differently. So even though this tool was qualified, Simulink, on a previous project by someone else, and it has been, MathWorks sells you the qualification package, you have to re-qualify it to show that you're using it correctly. Okay, cheers to that. Okay, some more questions. How does, from Sadra, how does, and pardon me if I mispronounce your names, how does DO331, Rob, I'll get you the expert, take this one. How does DO331 change interpretation of or extend other guidelines for model-based system engineering work? Okay. And remember, 4754B, the new version last year that's mandatory next year, has a lot of good information and guidance for model-based systems engineering. How does, for MBSE work, Sadra asked, which falls under the specification model, I think, what are the implications? And remember, folks, as Rob taught you, there's an aircraft, could have an aircraft model. There's a system, could have a system model. For software, and that's the purpose of this particular webinar, 331, software. We have an external world model, that's the specification model. Then the internal, that's the design, the low-level requirements, the data flow, control flow, if, then, do, while, for loop. That's the design model. You cannot auto-generate code from the spec model, only from the design model. Each is optional. Just remember that. That's on the slide of the 5 different modeling flavors that Rob presented 30 minutes ago. Okay, so Rob, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So DO331 does allow you to go directly from your system specifications into a specification model. But like Vance pointed out, it makes it more difficult for you to go directly to source code from that, because you still haven't considered all of your LLRs or your low-level requirements as part of that design. So you may have to have extra steps involved with getting from your system level HLRs down to your software level HLRs and LLRs.
Fantastic. Cool. Thanks, Rob. And Claudia has a comment. The tool qualification is necessary when processes document 170C are eliminated. Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay. So that means you don't verify the outputs. But remember, all tools eliminate, reduce, or automate something. So you don't need to pay attention to that clause. Okay. DO 178 has a sense of humor. Okay. Only if a tool eliminates, reduces, or automates, okay, steps within 178C. Folks, do you have any tools in your toolbox that don't eliminate, reduce, or automate? No, all tools do that. Okay, so you can ignore that part. The only question is, will you verify it, okay, by other means? Yeah, good point. Thank you. Now, another question. Can I use, Abdulman, can I use the model advisor to analyze the highest level model in a DO331 workflow and have it automatically check all nested reference models and subsystems for compliance and best practices? Additionally, are there, okay, Rob, this is a good one for you. Additionally, are there any guidelines or limitations on the allowed depth of nested models to ensure traceability and compliance? I have some thoughts on that one, but I'll let the expert, Mr. Piper, pipe in, no pun intended. Go ahead, Rob.
Hey, thanks, Vance. Yeah, so within DO331, there are no limitations on that, at least that I was able to uncover, that say how you go about implementing your model. That's purely as long as you are covering all the portions of your model and all of your different levels, they are included. But I don't think there's any limitations in that.
Okay. Now, that's a very good point. So there's a subjective criteria, Abdelman and everyone. Complexity. Complexity is subjective, okay? What's complex for me may not be complex for you, and I'm not talking about CEH, complex electronics hardware. That's a different definition. You have to read AMC 2152A for that, okay? That's public domain. You can download and read that. I'm talking about complexity of logic, okay? Source code, models, So what is too complex for me is not perhaps too complex for you, because you are Einstein. You're all smarter than me. That's why you're, watching this webinar, right? Well, complexity is subjective. If we use models, do we need to follow DO 331, even if we manually verify the model? Yes, we do. Okay. There's several aspects, including traceability. Even if you manually verify, if you're using models you have for software, you have to use 331. Now, that means you need a modeling standard. Why? Ooh, there's 5. Oh yeah, gotta go back to 178.331. There's 5 inputs to a model review. Oh, but I'm using a qualified modeling tool. I don't have to review the model. Surely. Oh, no, no, no. We trust the tool. Who's using the tool? Me, you, aviation engineers. Which aviation engineers do we trust? None. Okay. This is not law. In law, you're innocent until proven guilty. In aviation, you are guilty until we prove our innocence. So an engineer's making the model. Someone has to evaluate it for level A, level B, an independent, different person. Okay. Now, there's 5 inputs to review a model. One of them is the modeling standard. So the modeling standard is where, Abdelman, that's where we answer, and everyone, this question. What is the maximum complexity? Now, a good rule of thumb, approximately, is 6, 7, 8 levels. Think of a telephone number, a cell phone, a code. How many of you can memorize 3 or 4 numbers? 7495, easy. Go ahead and repeat these numbers right now. Ready? Don't write this down. Repeat these numbers. 179646821. There's 9 numbers there. Can any of you repeat those? Ooh. At what point, Mr. Einstein, do we become too complex? In general, we say 6, 7, 8 is the max limit. So that's a good rule of thumb, approximately, for those levels and nesting in the model traceability. Okay. Rob, anything you want to add on that? We good? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good, Vance. Yep.
Fantastic. Folks, I think we got all your questions. So terrific. Thank you very much for joining. Mr. Rob Piper, thanks for lending your expertise. And folks, we'll see you, I think, our next webinar for AFuzion clients and followers is going to be late February. Really cool stuff. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to you all. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.